Previously on Cloud Management Monthly.
Hi, I'm Brandon Gordon. I'm the guest on this month's Cloud Management Monthly.
Today's episode is really all about managing your infrastructure like a cloud provider.
Basically, capacity, having capacity available, costs money. So you want to make sure that you're getting the best value for your money. It's because those unused resources, that idle CPU, that idle memory, is just wasted money. The idea is looking at it from a capacity perspective, and then the cost associated with that, and then making sure that you manage to both. You manage to make sure you have enough capacity, but you also make sure you're optimizing from a cost perspective as well. Well, I actually have done this in Excel back when I was a customer, so it is not necessarily that easy of a thing to do. You don't realize how much a tool like this really benefits you, because it's every 5 minutes it gets the data, does all these calculations, it updates all this stuff, and you're constantly having the latest and greatest information.
Hi, welcome to Cloud Management Monthly. I'm Mandy Storbakken from the Cloud Management Business Unit, and I'm going to be talking about the cloud operating model. And in the meantime, I'm going to hand over to our hosts, Matt and Dan. Take it away.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Cloud Management Monthly. My name is Dan Kerr. I am here with my co-host, Matt Bradford. Matt, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing very well, Dan. How are you, man?
I am doing great, as we're kind of recording this a few days before Thanksgiving here in the U.S., so the weather is definitely changing. I'm looking forward to eating lots of food and then trying to lose it all year. With those resolutions that I never keep.
You're thinking about how you're thankful for such a wonderful co-host on a wonderful podcast here on Cloud Management Monthly. Thankful for all of our wonderful subscribers and listeners, right? I just assume that that's what you're going to say.
Yeah, exactly. And, that's a great segue, Matt, because, if you want to watch this podcast and see Matt and I, you can go to cloudmanagementmonthly.com and check us out on YouTube. Don't forget, we're also available via audio podcast on Apple and Google and Spotify and Podbean. So if you like this type of content, please subscribe, please listen to the show, and send us your feedback through Twitter or through the comments down below. So Matt, tell us, what do we have today? Because I think today is a really great show that we have coming up.
Yeah, we've talked about cloud management, and we've talked about how to implement it and so forth, but one thing we haven't really talked about is what is cloud. And I guess maybe I'll throw it to you, Dan. What is your definition of cloud?
That's a great question. It changes so much. Not only does it change by who you're talking to or the person that's trying to define what cloud is, but it changes almost by the month, right? As everything starts to evolve quicker and quicker, what cloud is definitely is a difficult thing to actually put a definition on.
Yeah, exactly, Dan. Cloud's not necessarily a tangible thing, yet it still needs to be well defined for, really being successful with it within your organization. And that's today's topic, is we're talking about the cloud operating model. How do we bring all these pieces together? How do we really kind of take things to the next level and really set the standards and set policies around cloud? So with that, Dan, let's bring on our guest today. Our guest is Mandy Storbakken, who is a cloud management technologist in the VMware Cloud Management Business Unit. And Mandy, thanks so much for jumping on here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what a cloud management technologist does.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I'm a cloud management technologist in the Cloud Management BU, as you mentioned. I've been in that position for just over a year, and it's a position that the BU funds to really be eyes and ears of the BU in the field, and to be in the field as much as possible, talking to customers and bringing that information back into the BU. So it's a role where we straddle both the customer side and the business unit side.
Okay. And in a previous life before VMware, you were a cloud architect, right?
That is right. Yes. So before I have actually really interesting perspective on all of this because I've been on all of the different sites. So if we want to look way back in time, I was a Unix administrator for about 10 years. That's probably the longest I was in any role because my motto is a change is as good as a rest. But I was a Unix admin, and then as Linux, and now I'm showing my age, came to fruition. Then I started getting involved with the VMware side as we started running Linux on VMware, which led to me getting involved with doing more and more with automation and self-service provisioning. And so I built 3 different private clouds in 3 different environments at customers. So I worked in an environment, and to be honest, the first one that I built, I did not drive that project, unfortunately, because it was actually very successful. I was kind of brought to it kicking and screaming, and I joke that it was band-aids and string and things put together, and somebody would request a resource and a light would go on and we'd run around and provision it. But through that experience, I learned how valuable those capabilities were to developers and our consumers internally. And so when I went to my next 2 roles, the next one that I went to, which was a large medical device company, for about 5 years, I built their private cloud, and then another company asked me to come and do the same thing over there, which I did a little reluctantly because I didn't want to undo all the work that I'd done over 4 years and start over. But I thought that I was in a position to take some of those learnings and best practices and things and be more successful. So at that point, VMware, talked to me for years about coming on board, but there wasn't really an interest prior to that. There was an acquisition that happened, and the timing was good, and so I came on board to VMware as a cloud management specialist in the field, which I did for a couple of years, which I loved. I loved the field-facing role. I love interacting with customers. And then after about a year or 18 months of that, the role in the business unit became available. And so I moved over into the business unit. And so it's been really interesting to look at both how things have evolved, both in cloud and in cloud management and within our customers, from the customer perspective, from a sales perspective, and now from the business unit perspective. So very different views on what's happening out there.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly a terrific story, and you bring a lot of experience here, and this is why we have you on the podcast today, because we cover topics like, first of all, what is cloud management, and then how do you get started with cloud management, and then operating like a service provider. So we kind of understand some of the benefits that cloud management can kind of bring to ourselves and to our organizations. But we're really looking to you to help us bring these pieces together. And about a year ago, you wrote a really good blog on the cloud operating model, and we're going to link this below for our viewers to check out here. But if you haven't, for those that haven't maybe read it or maybe aren't familiar with this concept of a cloud operating model, can you kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So, maybe I'll cover cloud management first. So there's a couple of presentations that I give. The Cloud Technologist, we do blog, so there is that blogging available that you're going to link to, and so we blog around cloud operating model, Kubernetes, DevOps, some of those topics from a cloud management perspective. And then, so as part of some of those cloud briefings, I'll go back over the evolution of cloud and cloud management, which I think is interesting to set some of the context. And so from cloud, we have virtualization, which is the foundation of all cloud, essentially, and then AWS with a very IaaS focused offering. Couple of years until we had Amazon, Azure and Google kind of jump on that bandwagon. And in that couple of years of a head start, AWS got this competitive advantage that they've pretty much maintained until today, not just because they were early, there's been a lot of work that's gone into that. But in today's world, you can see just how quickly you have to move to stay competitive. And then we had organizations that, the industry and the organizations themselves realized that despite best intentions, most companies are not going to be able to move, or many companies are not going to be able to move everything into a public cloud provider. There's certain things that will never be able to move or shouldn't move or aren't a good fit. And so we saw kind of the evolution into these hybrid models, with the public cloud providers, making available some infrastructure that you can put in your data center, but it's essentially an extension of the cloud, and VMware, where you can extend your known and loved vSphere environment out into these cloud providers. And then with what we've seen with COVID and just this need to move very quickly and to get additional resources very quickly. And even if you look at Azure, for example, in Europe, which nearly ran out of resources early on, this infinite scale of the cloud was tested. It's meant that lots of organizations, those who already had some agility built in, fared very well. Those who didn't had to move roadblocks that were in the way to cloud adoption out of the way very quickly, much more quickly than they even thought that they were capable of. And so as clouds evolved very quickly, so is cloud management. So we started off with, where I started, IaaS, basic, VM provisioning, VM plus the network components, plus some post-build configuration. Now you have a VM via self-service, through virtualizing additional pieces of the infrastructure stack, and therefore making those available through your cloud management solution, through having different platforms. So starting with just VMs on AWS and Azure, but really evolving into the support of native services on those platforms too. And then right through to what we, Matt, as you know, have been really focused on in the last couple of years around AI and machine learning, to really bring that self-driving data center to fruition, to be able to really focus on other areas within customer organizations. So cloud management is very different to how it was 5 years ago. Cloud is very different to how it was 5 years ago. And through that evolution, we've seen this kind of move to this cloud operating model. I think some of it originated from, first of all, having to have a definition of cloud. And some of our customers still struggle with that today. You will go and talk to customers, and we have a cloud first policy, or we have this is our cloud strategy. And yet, oftentimes when you talk to the people responsible for implementing that strategy, there's still confusion about, well, what do you mean by cloud? And what are the benefits? What are the objectives? Why are we doing this? And without that kind of buy-in, it's really, really difficult to be successful. And so the cloud operating model, I think, kind of started as a step back to say, what are we trying to do here? Let's get a strategy together of what the objectives that we're trying to meet, what's important to the organization, how we're going to make best use of cloud services, and put together a strategy. And then the implementation of that strategy becomes your cloud operating model. And it evolves all the time. So it's evolved from a consistent operating model or way of operating across different clouds. It includes the delivery of services in a cloud consumer model. So the delivery model, regardless of where your infrastructure or your services live, so private cloud and public cloud, that whole concept of hybrid cloud and being able to move workloads around. But really, to me also, it means adopting some of the best practices of the public cloud providers to be able to scale and operate and manage resources more closely to what they do. So automated remediation of things, excessive automation wherever possible. So it's really kind of three-pronged in that way, I believe. I know that was a long-winded answer, but that's kind of where I've come to where I'm at with the cloud operating model and what it means to organizations.
When I'm talking to customers, I often think they get hung up on cloud being a location or a destination, and it really is
Right.
an operating model with characteristics and a strategy that's built into that. Do you see that when you talk to a lot of people, that they're like, we have to go to the cloud, we need to get this on the cloud, when it's really about that operating model and strategy?
Yes, I struggle with that myself a little sometimes with customer conversations, because sometimes you go in, or I go in, and assume a baseline of understanding, or assume a baseline of when we talk about cloud, this is what we mean. And so many times still today, we'll get partway into that conversation, and I have to step back and say, hold on, maybe we need to go back and realign ourselves on definitions, cloud being one, cloud operating model being one too. Because if you're building an operating model about cloud, but you're not in agreement about what cloud means, then you're still not aligned. So cloud is automatically considered to be moved to the public cloud by many. By some, it's reworking or refactoring applications to take advantage of cloud. So cloud native applications, and actually refactoring applications instead of just lift and shift. So we try to make sure that as we start conversations, we do level set on definitions early on. But there is certainly, especially the further up you go in leadership within organizations, there is definitely an alignment of cloud means public cloud, somebody else's computer, essentially. And I think that's a fairly limiting way to approach it, because many of our customers and organizations, yes, there's a strategy to move workloads out there. There's a strategy to refactor applications to take advantage of cloud, but there's a larger footprint of legacy workloads and environments that are never going away, and those can't be ignored. And the thing about the cloud operating model is it doesn't ignore those. It tries to bring those in line with the things that are important about cloud, the things that were attractive about cloud: agility, flexibility, self-service, on-demand, metering, all of those things that made cloud very attractive and made shadow IT so prevalent. Are things that organizations need to apply to their existing environments.
Okay. So, kind of touching on something you'd mentioned before with, okay, we're going to be cloud first, right? Cloud first in and of itself is not a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You still need to kind of find, to your point, what clouds we're going to go to first. And is, considering things like, is there refactoring? Are those kind of some of the things that go into, the definition of what is cloud?
Yes, absolutely. So actually, the VMworld session that I gave, that you can link to here too, I'll give that to you afterwards. Okay. So the session that I gave at the last VMworld was around that entirely, and so it was around my experiences building the cloud platform at my first company, which I called Sad Cloud, kind of tongue in cheek, even though it wasn't. It was successful, but it was, we were bleeding edge, and it was actually the second one, not the string and band-aid cloud. That was, I didn't talk about that one. But then with that other organization that I went and was able to build out those same capabilities in a much shorter amount of time, and a better kind of consumer experience. And so what I talk about in that VMworld session is really around the difference that made those, one much more successful than the other. One was the technology has certainly come a long ways, over that 5-year period. But really, it was down to that cloud strategy. And so I went through what I believe to be critical in a cloud strategy. And I don't think you can be successful. You can be partly successful without a strategy. There's always tactical things that you can do, tactical uses of cloud services that will get you part of the way. But without an overarching cloud strategy, I think you're going to hit a brick wall in the organization. And there's so much to transitioning to a cloud operating model. There's the whole people part of it. There's the whole process part of it. There's the whole technology part of it. And the people process are really the largest, most difficult things to change. But that doesn't mean that organizations can't make progress in other areas. And so there's this concept of having this transformational technology maybe that can be a catalyst for driving some of those other changes, or at the very least future-proofing those environments for when those other changes come down. But so with the cloud strategy, the difference that I took at the second organization was, first of all, aligned on that definition of cloud, what it meant, what its objectives were, why we were even going after this. and then identify the stakeholders, make sure that they're involved so that you have support from those different groups as you move through something like building out these capabilities. But then also figuring out what it is that your consumers actually need. So two of the really interesting things that I took away from that was, number one, we kind of put a CASB on the network and watched things for a while to see what was the incidence of shadow IT, not just to see what are our users going and doing, but what also we were able to take from that is what are those services that then they're getting externally because we're clearly not delivering on them. And so that was a way to identify those. And then the second one was, as you start to look through the services that you deliver and start to move to a services-based model and determine what it is that you're going to deliver, do it in a silo and go into your ITSM tool and look at tickets and say, this is what has been asked for, this number of these resources over the last year. So this is what we're going to deliver. That is a very myopic view of what's been available, and so the best available for your consumers. What we find with the cloud operating model and with DevOps and just with the maturity of IT organizations is they're coming out of behind that curtain and actually talking to their users, right? And actually figuring out what they actually need and what the objectives are that they're trying to meet, and helping them figure out how to meet those objectives through technology. So there's so much to it, but yes, absolutely. That the first couple of steps are define what you're trying to achieve, and then we'll figure out how we're going to achieve it. And if it's through cloud, through which type of cloud technologies, and then make sure that everybody is aligned on those things.
But we're talking, more than just a policy or a mandate from IT, right? We're talking about looking at ways of kind of reducing that friction to kind of reduce shadow IT, and then also getting early buy-in from everybody to, align pretty much the entire organization around this policy. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So it is definitely a top-down and a bottom-up approach. So if you go and look at some of the early adopters of or drivers of the DevOps movement too, you'll see that those that were successful let go of the control and let go of the reins and let their teams decide what worked best for them. And where organization says we're going to do DevOps, whatever that means, and you're going to use these tools and do these different things, those were not successful efforts, because the success of DevOps is the cultural change that you give the teams the empowerment to be able to do the best that they can around those applications delivery and adding in the infrastructure components and making those resources work together, and empowering them to really not be caught up in the bureaucracy that we've built up over decades of trying to protect data and workloads, which is important and can't just be thrown away, but that we have to find ways of working faster. And so it's not an all or nothing, and it's a huge undertaking, but people shouldn't be put off by that, because there are certainly things that can be done to help move towards that. A lot of times talking to infrastructure and operations people through customer interactions or workshops or public speaking or whatever it might be, I'll get resources that come up and say, I've been told cloud first. We've been told everything goes to the cloud, but none of us really know what it means, and we don't have a strategy, at least not one that anybody has seen. Who should build that? And I usually say, do you have a cloud architect? Yes or no, maybe. If they do or they don't, usually it will be the cloud architect will start going down that road. But if you don't have one, if you're even earlier in your journey, the infrastructure architect or any resource can start to build that out. Because in my mind, if the infrastructure needs a seat at that table in operations, having those discussions and providing input. If you put together a thoughtful, considered strategy, and it doesn't have to be more than a few pages about what we're trying to achieve, what we think is viable, the protections that we have to have in place, the partnerships that we think are important, and present that to leadership, you've now put a stake in the ground to what and you can go from there. And so I don't think it's as important about who builds out that initial cloud strategy as to that it is a starting point for more discussions and more interactions and more collaboration around what you really need your IT organization to look like.
Right.
And if you wait for it to come from the top down, it may never come, or it might not meet your needs. And so it has to be, I think it's a meeting in the middle. It's everybody is responsible for moving the organization forward.
Yeah, and in your blog post when you talk about the cloud operating model, you reference, and you did here today, the people, process, and technology part of it, and you state that people are the most critical component to that, and that seems to kind of back up just what you're saying. Is there a 1, 2, 3 of that, or is it a combination really of all three of those that have to work together at the same time? Everything kind of has to come together to make sure that, you're going down the right path of selecting the right cloud strategy for organization with that cloud operating model in mind.
There are different perspectives on that. And I know that we certainly have a perspective that a transformational platform, like the platforms that we have, can be a catalyst to help kickstart the discussions and the movement towards the people and process changes that need to take place. There's another side to that too, and it really depends on the organization and the people. My coworker has an anecdote that he says that if you take a Ferrari and give it to somebody in 1850 that rides a horse, you're giving them the best possible technology, but they're not going to benefit from it. And so it's a continuum. It really depends on the culture of the organization. But I'll give you an example, and this is a very tactical example. But we were very early adopters of NSX at one organization that I worked at, and we were actually fairly early in providing load balancing as a service and firewall capabilities through the cloud platform. And so I had a cloud engineering team that built that out. Now, at the time that we passed that off to operations, because we had to get it operationalized, the operations side of the house, and this is not DevOps, right? That's a different conversation. This is very separate, developers, engineering, and operations. But the operational side of the house did not have a cloud operating team or the concept of a team that managed cloud services. And so we took NSX and all of this great functionality, automated, on demand, included, built into the application stack as you deployed an application and the infrastructure, and leadership tried to break it up to meet our organizational requirements. So, okay, it's quite simple. We're going to give the firewall components to the firewall team, and we're going to give the load balancing components to the load balancing team, and the network components are going to go, and the network configuration and management is going to go to the network team. And of course, this just didn't work. It was never going to work. It's a comprehensive platform that somebody needs ownership over the entire thing. You can't take different pieces of the puzzle and say, continue building on this, and then bring them back together and hope that they still fit. And it was actually increasing complexity rather than decreasing complexity. So all three pieces are equally critical. Whether one can be a catalyst for changing another, probably, but that's going to depend on the organization as to which way that goes. So none of them can be completed in isolation, but not all of them have to be completed at the same time either. It can be an evolution and not a revolution.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just kind of thinking about, you mentioned being an early adopter for new technologies, NSX. Obviously, this doesn't sound like a set it and forget it kind of thing, right? You don't just create your policies and that's it, we're done, right? You need, is how often should policy be reviewed by, should it be on the cloud architect to review it? Should, they get everybody back together in a room? Like how frequently and how many people need to be involved in that?
Yeah. So it's at the next organization that I went to, where I was able to do the same thing much more quickly. We had somewhat of the same problem. I had said that when I come over, one of my requirements is that I have a dedicated team as we build out at least the initial platform. And not only do I want these resources dedicated, but I want them in a room all day, every day. I'm not sure that they enjoyed it particularly, but until we get this delivered. Because the problem is, a lot of these initiatives are undertaken as on the side. People still have their day jobs, and in infrastructure and operations, as you know, you can work on these other things when nothing's on fire, but there's always something on fire. And so in terms of priorities, it's just kicks and starts on making progress. So over there, it was kind of, we were all in with the cross-functional teams until delivery, and then we kind of, at least initially, went back to an operating model that wasn't ideal. And you'll only get so far with that, and you will absolutely hit a wall and not be able to make any more process. When we talk about a cloud operating model, we talk about moving to a service delivery model that we used to say it's service-based. So whatever your network services are that you're providing, or whatever your infrastructure services are that you're providing, or your application services, it's a service and there's a service owner. It's an iterative process, moving more into kind of the DevOps concepts and some of those best practices. And so it should be a constant evaluation of what's working and what's not, and what needs improvement. None of this is set it and forget it. Whenever I'm building things now, or wherever I was, I'm always aware of the fact that this is already legacy before it even goes live. Yeah. And so we always have to be making changes. And the other thing is this whole kind of about making sure that all of the correct stakeholders are involved, is that there's a unlimited number out there of organizations that have said, we'll build it and they'll come, and they've struggled. And that's because when you're looking at building a cloud strategy and transitioning to a cloud operating model, that's why those objectives are so important. Because when I was first building out the first couple of services, automated, let's say an automated Windows VM, for example, through the self-service portal, those teams did not buy into that at all. They said there's a lot of work involved there. Everything we could automate, we have automated. It's the hard stuff that's left. And it doesn't take us that long. It's, it takes me an hour to deploy from template. It takes another hour to do the post build script configuration, or whatever that might be. But that's because they're not seeing the bigger picture around, actually what we're building here is not just an automated provisioning of a X. It's a foundation for everything that we're going to do moving forward. And so, yeah, there are many pieces to it, but buy-in from the appropriate resources is really, really important, because it doesn't matter how great your technology is, if nobody uses it, it's irrelevant. And a constant iteration of reviewing, is the service delivering what it's supposed to, is the consumer getting what they need, is it providing what's needed on the operational side of the house. It's a constant review of operational processes and policies. I know, again, that sounds overwhelming, but actually it's not. Once you're in that kind of a cycle, it just becomes second nature.
Through this continuous review and everything, obviously, we're gonna maybe change paths at some point down the road. Does kind of a rollback strategy? As we were kind of talking about refactoring things for various platforms. Does rollback strategy and kind of thinking about how are we going to help change direction? Is that something to kind of help? It's good to look at really kind of at the beginning, as well as how can we kind of reduce friction in the future if we decide to change direction?
So rollback strategy in terms of cloud adoption. Mm-hmm. really is something that also needs to be in that cloud strategy, which many organizations do not consider upfront. It's that whole Hotel California type thing, right? Oh, yep, we're going to save all this money. We're going to move all of these resources to a public cloud provider, lift and shift or whatever that might be, and many of our customers have come to the realization that there's going to be some kind of repatriation or move to another platform because, for whatever reason, for change in direction, for Microsoft or Citrix changing their licensing rules or whatever it might be. I think that we have to look at it that way with all of technology. It's all temporary. Nothing lasts forever. So whatever we implement is temporary. Whatever infrastructure our services are running on is their temporary home. Whatever the current state of the application is, it's temporary because we're continually iterating on this. And when you have that in mind with everything that you do, you build in those protections to make it smoother, to make those changes throughout the life cycle of the service. We all in infrastructure and operations and IT have struggled through that continually. There's these organizations that I've worked at that had application environment version 1, application environment version 2, application environment version 3, and all of them were supposed to be complete replacements for the one that came before because they're newer and they're more modern and they offer all of these new things. But there's been customers that they were never able to get off of the older versions. And so now we would have legacy app 1 or legacy app 1, right? And so this stuff never goes away for those very reasons, because those transitional considerations were never made or never considered a priority at the time of the build out of that environment.
Yeah, but legacies are forever, Mandy.
Yes, it is. It most certainly
Even when
is.
it comes to application.
I know. I joke because I started my career. I've been here 20 years now in the United States, and so one of the first projects I was on when I came to the United States was a migration, a mainframe migration project. I was at a bank and we were getting rid of the mainframe, and
still
I worked
there.
on this
Banks
very
still have
diligently.
mainframe.
Yep.
Keep paying that
My
AS400
husband
bill.
recently went back to work at that same bank, and yes, believe you me, it's still running all of the critical apps. But that was 20 years ago.
Yeah. So we hit on some people, we hit on process, and why they're so important. And, what Matt and I like to talk about, I think most, is some of the technology behind that, especially as a cloud management focus. Where does a cloud management platform fit within that cloud operating model? What layer is it on? Is it part of the platform? Where does the specific technology choices come in when you're building out a cloud operating model?
So the technology in the cloud operating model is the fun part, and anybody here or listening to this is entirely the piece that they are interested in, and it's why we're all in IT. But the cloud operating model is essentially the operational implementation of your cloud strategy. And so it starts with the cloud strategy, and what is your strategy around getting the best value from your cloud services. And so the cloud management business unit at VMware has two approaches to that. We have our cloud health portfolio of solutions, which was an acquisition a couple of years ago, which is focused on those customers that have a footprint that's very prevalent in the public cloud. And so usually that comes in that a user has deployed an application to public cloud and now finds that they don't want to support the underlying infrastructure and throws it over the fence to operations, or a bill lands on the desk of the CEO and they want to know where is all this money going. And the organization now says, okay, now IT, this is back in your hands. We need you to take control and apply governance and policy and management and get these costs under control and let us see exactly what's happening out there. And that's our cloud health management solution portfolio, and that's what those products do. On the other side, there's those other customers that it's kind of an inside out. So they're very comfortable in what they're doing in their own environment, although they want to transition to a cloud operating model so that they can take the infrastructure that they know and trust and that they have skill sets built around and extend that into maybe public cloud in order to take advantage of the agility and flexibility of public cloud, but also to take on those cloud best practices to make themselves more operationally efficient in their own environments and provide that consumer experience that they would get from a public cloud for their internal environments. So all of those capabilities associated with a cloud operating model are what we deliver out of the cloud management business unit, without question. And the solutions evolved, over the years from essentially an IaaS automation platform to a true solution that offers all of those capabilities. So we look at the vRealize suite in particular as kind of being that glue between those different use cases that customers are going after. So if you're looking at modernizing your IT organization, you're modernizing the underlying infrastructure with something like VMware Cloud Foundation, for example, but you want to add the capabilities of self-service portal or APIs or automated remediation or visibility or even delivery pipelines for the infrastructure components. All of those things come out of vRealize, the cloud management solution. If you're looking for a cloud, an evolution to cloud use case where you want to start migrating more of your existing workloads to the cloud through something like VMC on AWS, but again, you want to add in those consistent visibility and operations, self-driving operations, we call it, as Matt knows, and a consistent user experience so that we can offer that self-service and APIs and a catalog that's abstracted that complexity of the underlying environments, whether it's AWS or Google or on-prem, is abstracted away so that your users get this consistent experience. That's vRealize cloud management that brings those pieces. And so whatever the other solutions are that you're bringing together to build out this new way of operating, to bring innovation in and support your developers and your lines of business in moving very quickly in what they're trying to do. Whatever those different pieces of technology that you're bringing in are, the cloud management solution brings them all together under one umbrella, gives you that visibility across the board, connects the pieces together, gives a unified face, and really is central to all of the other solutions that we offer. I don't think you can have a cloud operating model without those capabilities.
We agree. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have self-service and you're not able to, use pipelines for things or infrastructure as code or have some kind of showback or metering or any of these things that are the typical definition of cloud that you're now trying to apply across your on-prem workloads too. Do you have a cloud? I mean, this is an important question for organizations. At what point do you believe you have a cloud? I'm not here to tell you that, your baby is ugly and that's not actually a cloud. We're here to talk to you about what are your actual objectives and what you're trying to achieve, and what that means. And so in most cases, we find that vRealize is absolutely critical to providing those capabilities to meet those objectives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, between the self-service, like you said, right? The self-service piece of it, and then being able to kind of sort of have this layer just sitting on top of, whether you're running it on-prem, whether you're running hybrid, like VMware Cloud on AWS, whether you're running public, right? And that's really kind of where vRealize Operations kind of sits to help make sure that you're running efficiently and, helping to really kind of keep the lights on and keep the burning bright too, right? So. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
vRealize Operations has come a tremendous way in the past few years as well. I was, again, an early adopter of vRealize Operations, and we only went and looked at it when something was broken, and then half the time we couldn't figure out head nor tail from it anyway, because there's so much information, there's so much data. It wasn't even information, it was just data. And so we've worked really hard over the past few releases, couple of 10 plus years, to make it more usable, to make it more intuitive, and to make it relevant to different types of persona. So, you can have your infrastructure person that's logging in, that's looking at a dashboard that's, important to one view. You can have your application user that's logging in with that same underlying data and the same, conclusions, but a different view that is important to them, that they understand. And then on top of that, the other couple of pieces that transform vRealize operations from being a monitoring and alerting tool into a layer in your cloud management operating model is automated remediation. So you have these tickets that come in all the time, same thing, file system filling up, whatever it might be. You go in your ticketing system and look, you'll be able to identify them pretty quickly, that there's a run book that somebody in the operational team will sit down and follow the same steps every time to resolve. Why is there human intervention in that situation? It doesn't make any sense. And then, move all the way from that to moving into, or the workload optimization and placement. You tag something for Linux, you only want it to run on a Linux host. Why wouldn't your technology take care of that? Why does that require human intervention to go in and maintain those policies or those workloads to make sure that they're getting the resources they need when they need them? The technology should know better than any human about what's needed and preemptive steps to take and those kinds of things. And so that's what's being worked towards, right up to the AI and ML components that now with vSAN, for example, as you know, will take a look at the environment, tweak some changes, look at the results, change them back, make some more changes to really optimize things. Again, does that need to be a human that takes care of that, or is that something that the technology can take care of? And if so, what can that human go and now apply skills that are really only available through human intervention? Where can that human now go and apply those skills to really move the organization forward? And not only is it a better way of operating, but we consistently find that there's better job satisfaction. You take some of those mundane, repeatable tasks out of somebody's day-to-day, it leads to better job satisfaction. It frees up time to do enablement and to look at new technologies. And there's all sorts of benefits that come just from some of moving some of these operational tasks into different layers in that kind of operational model.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, get rid of some of that busy work so you can focus on things like coming up with cloud operating models and everything. That makes perfect sense. And, you kind of talked about enablement, and I got to ask you, I mean, as a, somebody who came up through the ranks and became a cloud architect and, now you're working at VMware, like, do you have any sort of career tips for maybe somebody, systems administrator, maybe looking to get into that sort of cloud architect type of role? I mean, what kinds of things could they be sort of looking at as far as enablement and maybe things that they could do in their day-to-day to kind of get toward that goal?
Yeah, my advice would be to just keep learning. Most people are, a lot of people of my generation fell into IT. We all went to school for something else and, ended up in some kind of job in IT that we ended up staying in because we found that we loved it, or we found that we loved the paycheck. In my case, it's a little bit of both, and we've been very lucky in that respect. But in order to keep moving, I think that for the culture of technology is really odd in that we all love the new shiny new thing, and yet we're so change averse. We're so stuck in our ways in that whole "who moved my cheese" thing, and it doesn't make any sense to me. But it's there and it's true. But if you're interested in this kind of career, the great thing about IT is that there are so many opportunities. You talk to people, they've been a DBA, they've been an infrastructure resource, they've been a developer, and finally these people that have kind of dabbled in all of these different areas are starting to become sought after in itself, because as we move into this new way of working, we need an understanding of more than just our silo. And so with IT, you have to be self-driven and you have to truly have an interest in the technology. But if you do, the world is your oyster. Just keep on learning. There's free resources out there. There's paid resources out there. There's different things that you can get involved in. You can build things at home. Back in the day, I had a spare room that was all a lab and where I dabbled with things. Today, you don't even need that. You just need some resources out on a cloud provider, and you can play till your heart's content. Stay interested. Stay excited by technology. And stay connected to the other people in your organization so that they think of you first when a position opens up. Or not, they don't even need to think of you. They just have to make sure that you're aware of it. So yeah, stay connected, stay interested, and stay excited.
Mandy, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an awesome conversation talking about the cloud operating model. Be sure to check out, Mandy's blog post. We'll link it below, as well as her VMworld session. And, you talked about staying connected. So how can our audience connect with you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, probably through the blog post is the best way, or on Twitter. I'm not a great social media person, but I am on Twitter, and so I will tweet something hopefully interesting now and again.
Well, you're highly sought after. So.
I'm actually really open to somebody reaching out to me. I love to hear from customers because, one of the reasons why I moved into the business unit is I always thought there was such a disconnect between the marketing organization and the business unit that was developing and marketing the solutions, and how they were actually used at the customer. I would come to all these betas and I would talk to engineering, I would talk to product management, and they'd tell me something and I'd say, shouldn't I be telling you how we use this? Shouldn't I be telling you what we need? And so I love to hear from customers because I love to get that realistic view on what's actually happening out there. We can read white papers and we can read the analyst reports and we can listen to others about what's happening, but unless we really talk to our customers, we really don't know what's happening out there. So I'm happy for anybody to engage at any time. It's my favorite part of the job.
Well, thanks again for your time and the great conversation. We really appreciate you being on the show today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Matt, what a great interview and great guest Mandy was. I'm so glad she took some time to be on the show today. She really put kind of in perspective what a cloud operating model is and all the components that make it up, talking about people, processes, technology, and strategy. Everything has to kind of be interchangeable. I thought that was really a great discussion about how companies need to adopt a cloud operating model in order to get their cloud strategy under control.
Yeah, and as somebody who's implemented these strategies and these policies numerous times, Mandy's really the perfect person to be talking about this. I mean, she highlighted that this is a pretty complex thing, but these are the things that you need to consider kind of early on, right? Bringing in those stakeholders, making sure that you have buy-in from everybody, also taking that feedback from everybody, because maybe you aren't really thinking about every single angle, and maybe your customers and your users are doing things in a way that you didn't think they were doing, right? So getting all that buy-in to really bring everybody on board and feel like a part of this to really eliminate some of that shadow IT. I thought it was a fantastic conversation, a lot of really good information.
Well, Matt, that does it for this episode of Cloud Management Monthly.
Yeah, 5 episodes down for Cloud Management Monthly. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching and for listening to this podcast. If you want more content from us, please do hit that subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Tell us where you're listening from. Say hello, whatever. If you have an idea for another episode, let us know as well. So thanks again for checking out Cloud Management Monthly. We'll see you next month.
See you, everybody.
Or should I just refer to ourselves as the twins?
The twins. The Cloud Twins.
The twins.
Oh, that should have been our show. The Cloud Twins.
What? The Cloud Twins.
Man, we missed it. We'll have to do another podcast, spin-off podcast.
My husband said if AirPods are good enough for Kelly Ripa on Good Morning America, then they're good enough for me.
That's right. Yep.
It's okay. As long as I just look directly at you two and don't look at my video, it's not off-putting. So I'll just do that.
Okay.
I think it'd be more off-putting to look at Matt and I, to be honest with you.
Right?
I'm here with my co-host, Matt Bradford. Matt, how are you doing today, sir? Today, sir.
I'm fantastic today.
I said that twice. How are you doing today, sir? My brain was like,
today, Junior.
I didn't even stutter. I like said the word twice,
Yep, today.
the entire word. Yeah. All right, let's do it again.
Yeah, I don't want to be long-winded and
No.
lose people.
No.
Okay.
No,
okay,
that's
great.
right. Lose people. Lose the 20 people that we have watching.
We're still here.
Right, yeah.
Sorry, we're sorry to.
Listeners.
Yeah. Sorry to. Maybe you thought this was a bigger deal than what it was. I apologize for that. We should have probably prefaced that, but.